Welcome, everybody. Looks like we are live. I am so excited that everybody decided to join, especially on a Friday in December. Happy Friday, as I love to call it. I would love to hear from everybody. It's just 12 o'clock my time, 3 p.m. If you're on Eastern time. I know we're coming from a variety of places and all around the world. A couple housekeeping things before we dive in. I have the chat. I love it when everybody uses the chat. It makes me super excited because it reminds me that everybody is here and present. So please drop questions in the chat. Toward the end of my presentation, I will drop into the chat myself and I will go through the questions and answer most of them. Close your browsers. If you're like me, you probably have 20 browsers open and maybe your cell phone open to your side as well. Close them up. Spend this time for yourself. We'll be in here less than 60 minutes and you're going to get a nice roadmap for 2026 for yourself. I want to introduce myself for those of you who do not know me. I'm Stacey Salyer, but my friends call me the Slayer. So now that we are here together, we're all friends. So next time you see me at a conference or in person, you can call me the Slayer. I would like to share, why am I sharing this information? You're here, you want to buy a property management company or you want to grow your business by several hundred doors instead of door by door. Why am I qualified to teach that? Well, I built a property management company from the ground up. I also acquired one at the start of COVID in my market. And I've done acquisitions on a national level. I have had hundreds of conversations and seen hundreds of different deals across the United States. So I'm definitely qualified to get you where you want to go. Today, we are going to be giving you the clarity for your next journey, the confidence to do this, and the roadmap to acquire your next property management company. So let's dive in. We're going to talk about a 90-day roadmap. Now, if you are acquiring a property management business or a book of business, the days could vary, but I'm going to use it as a 90-day roadmap. So I'm going to talk about like first conversation to close. We're going to talk about that in the 90-day time frame. Let's start with the first point, the first conversation. So before we dive into what that first conversation should look like, we should sit down with ourselves and think about where we want to build our business. Most of us that own property management companies were taught you just got to add doors one by one. But what you find yourself doing is you find yourself grinding and burning out. And you're chasing doors. You might add 5 one month, 10 another month, maybe 2 another month. And then you have the churn on top of that. Well, what if I could show you a better way to lessen your burnout and use your energy to acquire at a greater rate? So with that, you want to really sit down with yourself and think, where in my market do I want to acquire? Do I want to acquire directly in my market? Do I want to look outside further in my market? If I do that, what is that going to look like? You really need to start strategizing before you even start having the conversations. That brings me to the conversation piece. Now, when I was doing this, I actually did close 1,000+ door deals on cold calls. Now, when I was doing cold calls, I did not call people and say, hey, I'm Stacey. I want to buy your business. Let's meet for coffee. Instead, I really worked on that relationship piece. So it's really important that you're doing your due diligence before you start jumping in and making phone calls. You want to create a list of everybody in your market. So you have an idea of like where you want to acquire, and then you should go through and create an entire list of all the property management companies or any realtor that you know is doing property management and keep track. Now, you might have conversations in person, you might have conversations on the phone, but you really want to listen when you're having those initial conversations. Just a reminder, feel free to pop questions into the chat. I will definitely answer them toward the end. What should those conversations look like? I think the most important part, especially when you're doing cold calls or what I call warm calls, is just asking them. You've expressed interest in possibly selling. Tell me more. What is prompting you to do that? And then really stop and listen to what they have to say and take notes. Are they looking to get out because they're burnt out, because they are aging out? Is this a boomer business? Really listen as to what their reasons why. And then as you're having that conversation, of course, you're going to be able to build some questions upon that conversation. But then Another good one is to ask, what would success look like for you? And what does your timeline look like? So, again, this is going to give you a really good idea of how serious they are. Are they just fishing to see what their company might be worth? Or do they actually really have a timeline? Like maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 3 years, but really diving in to find out those answers. So you really get an idea and you're really listening to what they're telling you. And what would success look like to them? Do they want to be paid out 100% when they close? Do they need money? Is there something going on with them? Is there an illness in the family? Do they need to move and can't deal with owning something anymore? There's a lot of information you can get without necessarily asking the questions. And then it's important to also establish, do they have a team? And what would that look like for them? Is it something they would insist on wanting to keep their team? So would their team go with the sale? If that's yes, then you kind of want to get a little bit of intel, like how long has your team been with you? What kind of roles do they play? And all those kind of questions. So again, just really feeling it out. I like to talk about the first conversation as kind of like the dating piece, right? Imagine you don't go into first date and talk about marriage, right? When you're having coffee, right? You kind of want to go on the first date, second date, third date, fourth date, feel them out and see where it's going to go. After a few conversations and both parties, buyer and seller, are like, yeah, let's move forward and see how this is going to work out. Now we're in the engaged state. You could look at the letter of intent, or what we like to call the LOI, as like maybe that promise ring, right? So we haven't like officially proposed, but we've promised, like, yeah, we're going to look at you. You're going to let us look at you. This is a mutual look at each other type thing. Not like we're not going to go look at others while we're doing this at the same time. So that's what we move into due diligence. I also like to call this part the messy middle. It seems like a lot of times people understand the conversation piece and then the close piece, but then you have the messy middle piece. And that's where a lot of questions fly around, especially on Facebook or LinkedIn. What do I do here? What do I do there? So we're now in the promise ring phase, right? We're in due diligence. This is where it's important that both parties are really kind of interviewing each other. So you as the buyer really need to make sure that you are going through every single checklist, crossing all your T's, dotting all your I's, so that you can make sure that you are getting what is promised of you or to you. This is where you want to start looking at contracts, take a look at the property management agreement and the lease they have. Now, this may sound like a lot of work, but I highly recommend that you read and look at every single contract they have. You may say, oh my gosh, they have 300 doors. That's a lot of reading. It is, but I guarantee that the majority of property management companies don't have the exact same agreement for every client. I would pretty much bet somebody a coffee that that is not the case. And that's fair because you may have some clients where you've done a different deal, or maybe it's an older property management agreement and you've updated it, but you haven't updated with all clients. So there's a lot of reasons why. So it's really important that you're looking through every single contract. Now, the cool thing is that with AI, you could also utilize AI, upload all the different contracts and, have it analyze them for you and see if it'll spit out some different information as far as like any variances. So there are some tricks, but at the end of the day, you as the buyer are responsible to double check everything that's given to you. You really want to ensure that the lease you're purchasing is compliant with state law. If there's fees that they're charging, that those are actually in the lease, or, whatever the case may be for your particular market. But it's really important that you're really doing due diligence on those two contracts. Then you want to look at your client mix. Something I talked about in my boot camp was the client mix, especially looking at LLCs. For example, if I own 50 doors under 5 different LLCs, so I had 10 doors per LLC, if you're not really doing due diligence, it may look like there's 5 different clients, but there isn't really, it's just me. So it's really important that you're digging in to what is there and you're asking the questions. Some sellers are going to be really upfront and give you everything. Some may not even think of it. Like they may not even know, or depending on what you're buying, if it's more like a fire sale where the family is selling it and they weren't in the business, they're not going to know. So it's really up to you as the buyer to do that due diligence. I highly recommend, then again, is looking at the actual doors. So getting a list of every single home that they manage, every single unit, and doing drive-bys, taking a look at the neighborhood, the area, the houses from the outside. Is there a lot of deferred maintenance? Have they been doing walkthroughs? When do their move in and move outs look like? Do they do photos? Do they have a process for that? It's really important that you're looking at what you're purchasing. You're not purchasing the actual buildings, but you are purchasing the contracts. And a lot of deferred maintenance brings a lot of work in the future for your team if you haven't taken a look at that. And then with that, you also want to look at their processes. So who is responsible for the teaching and the training? Do they have every process documented in an actual process system? So a lot of companies, even including myself when I first opened, I had things documented. They were scattered about. A lot of them were in my brain until later down the road when I put everything in an actual process system and my team could then access it. But if you are looking at the owner, the seller, and everything's in their head, they're not empowered to make any decisions when they don't know what to do. You have to take that into consideration when you're looking at pricing for yourself. A lot of this isn't necessarily going to kill a deal, but you need to know, eyes wide open, before you tell somebody, yes, I will buy this. This is what I'm willing to pay. You need to make sure that it's going to work for you. With that, you want to look at the mix of what you're purchasing in those contracts, because if you're managing like all A-class product and you're buying C-class product, that's a very different beast to manage. Deferred maintenance versus non-deferred maintenance, walkthroughs versus no walkthroughs. So it's really important that you're doing that whole due diligence and asking all those questions. And then, of course, documenting everything for yourself as well. You need to really look at financials. You really need to require at least 2 years worth of, P&L, balance sheets, getting into their property management software system. What fees are they really charging? Do the trust accounts match? Are they doing 3-way reconciliations every month? Does what's in one report match what's really in the bank? And really diving deep into that and making sure that everything truly matches. The cool thing about this, though, is when doing a large acquisition, you can take a look at the expenses and start pulling out things that won't be relevant to your business. If you already have property management software, you're not going to have to purchase a whole new one. You're just going to absorb those doors into yours. That's obviously going to cost you, so you should account for that cost, but it's probably not going to cost, you're not going to be paying double systems. Same with the owner's salary. If the seller is drawing a salary, you're not going to have to pay that. But you will have to account for who's going to take over managing those doors if it was the seller. That's something you really want to be looking at when you're doing your due diligence and thinking ahead as far as, okay, this is what they have. This is how I would move it into what I'm doing. The other piece that a lot of people don't talk about is the seller themselves. Where are they with their mindset? Are they going to be able to let go? And what does that transition look like? When you're buying what I call a boomer business, boomer businesses are a great buy. A lot of times you can get them for a pretty good deal, but they do tend to be a little bit more labor intensive. The seller does tend to be a little bit more on the emotional side because they've always worked in their business. It's just kind of been a job for them. So it's really something that you need to have that conversation up front and talk a lot about what is that going to look like? What does that look like transitioning their team and transitioning the clients? I always recommend a minimum of a 6-month clawback. Clawback is a period of time where if some doors leave, you're not going to have to pay for those doors. If a seller doesn't want to do a clawback, that is a pretty big red flag, and that should reflect in the price of what you're paying. If you can get a 12-month clawback when you're buying, that is amazing. And I highly recommend that. Kind of industry standard. If you want to say standard out there isn't really one, but it's usually 6 months. I've seen some deals where the seller won't even do a clawback. But again, that's all in your due diligence timeframe and something that you should be looking at as well as then deciding, will this work for you? Because not every deal that comes forward is a good deal. Just because you have this one in front of you doesn't mean you have to pull the trigger. Sometimes it's better to go through the process and then think, oh gosh, this is not the right fit for me. And that's okay. That's why it was just a promise ring. There was no big diamond yet. And that's okay to then say, part ways and say, I really appreciate your time. And this just isn't the right deal for me. You can walk away. But let's say in this case, we move from promise ring to engagement ring. And all parties are like, yes, this is a go. We're now officially engaged and we want to move forward. Buyer has done due diligence. We've got the team behind us. We've now decided to bring in our CPA, our attorney, our insurance advisor. Meanwhile, back at the first conversation, you've already had your acquisition coach, consultant. They're still with you side by side. But now the whole A team is there. Your whole superhero team is around you. And that's when you're going to start structuring your deal. It's really important that you've got that A team around you. You don't want to just be going to Chat GPT and having it write up a contract for you. I don't recommend that. Highly recommend find a good contract attorney in your area and have them write up a contract. They know what they're doing. Somebody who actually does M&A. Same with your insurance advisor. Insurance is a big deal. The seller also should probably be getting tail insurance. That's also a conversation that you should be having during that due diligence and structuring the deal time, like who's paying for that, as well as you're going to have to talk to your insurance advisor and let them know, hey, I'm just bringing on an additional 300 doors. That is going to make a difference on your E&O insurance premium. So that's your time you're using to structure your deal. That's all the paperwork time and the back and forth and deciding on your clawback period and deciding on final price and going back and forth. So you're engaged, you've set a date, the wedding is closed, everybody's moving toward that and planning the final party, the reception, structuring the deal with your superhero team and moving forward. We've talked about conversation, due diligence, what to look for, high level. Now we're engaged, structuring the deal, the back and forth, the contract, the clawback period, what the final price will be, and what the transition looks like. So now we move to the wedding day, which is the close date. And honestly, it's kind of anticlimactic. So after all that, really the first three are the biggest lifts, if you will. The close date's usually pretty easy. It's, about signing the contracts. It's about transferring all the funds. You've got to get your security deposits and rent money transferred over and you've got to pay them and everything. And everybody's all happy and champagne is popped and there you go. And then that's it. That would be your essential 90-day roadmap from, first conversation to close. And it's very different than hustling door by door and trying to add 5 doors at one time and running out and doing all these meetings. If you have the right roadmap and the right team around you, it's not that messy. So part of what I wanted to talk about as well is the mindset shift. I love talking about mindset and transformation. Back in the day, I was an operator mindset, and there's nothing wrong with being in an operator mindset. It was always like, how do I add more doors? Where do I go? I need to go get these realtor referrals. I need to make sure I'm on Facebook. I need to make sure I'm going to this realtor meeting. There's nothing wrong with that, but it is a grind and it is a hustle. You're always kind of stressed out and trying to add more doors. It's the door-to-door approach, the operator mindset. You're going to have growth. It's going to be slow, steady. You're always relying on constant lead generation, but you do start to get limited by time, especially as you grow your company. Once I shifted into the acquirer mindset, I saw a whole new world and doors open for me. Once I stepped into my market and I said, I buy businesses, I buy growth. I'm buying a business that has income in it. And that's what I do. I acquire companies. It transformed me as a person and it made a big difference for my business. I really transformed into an acquirer. Anyone can do it. It's just a matter of changing your mindset, going from operator to acquirer. I also wanted to hit on my experience. Not only did I acquire a large company in my market during COVID, which was kind of crazy, but ended up being really good. I did acquisitions on a national level. I've had hundreds of conversations. I've traveled around the US. Like I said, I did cold calls. I closed 1,000+ door deals on cold calls, anywhere from 100 doors to over 1,000 doors and everything in between. There are some really good questions you want to be asking the seller before you hire your CPA, attorney, and insurance advisor. So I'm going to go through those a little bit. One of them, the first one is owner dependency. This is really important when you are in the due diligence phase. You really want to see like how dependent is the business on the owner. Is the owner still managing? Are they acting as a property manager? What's their actual salary? If they're not going to be managing those properties, are the clients going to freak out? Are the residents going to freak out? Will the team freak out? So it's really important to see how dependent the business is. If it's a boomer business, generally they are pretty dependent on the owner. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to keep in mind that does matter when you're doing your transition, and it can affect the price. You should probably not pay as much. Whereas if you are buying a true business, like let's say I own a property management company and I have a full team and everything's documented and I literally don't even have to be there. I could be wherever I want in the world. I'm more the CEO. It's not as dependent on me. My clients aren't even going to necessarily miss me. It's just a matter of taking those contracts and moving them to another company. So that's really important. Now, the company I just described, the second company, most likely you'll pay more for that because it's actually like a true business that you're buying. The second one is cash flow clarity. So you do want to make sure that numbers actually really match. You really want to dig in deep for that. If numbers are not your thing, you do want to start pulling in experts around you to go and do that. That's something that I personally did. Actually did have my CPA go through the seller's QuickBooks. We went through PMS systems. We cross-checked everything and we did it multiple times. This is really important. You want to make sure that everything matches and that you're not finding major skeletons in the closet once you close. Number 3, hidden expenses. This is actually not necessarily a bad thing. So hidden expenses, a lot of times we would connotate that as a negative, but hidden is more about what are they spending money on that maybe you don't have to spend money on. So all of us are business owners. A lot of us do this. We will run things for our business that aren't necessarily where we have to use it for our business, like vehicles or employing my 17-year-old where they do some work as a buyer. I'm not going to be paying for that salary or that vehicle. So that's the cool thing. When you're doing the due diligence, you can go through a checklist and highlight the things that you're not going to have to pay for. That's going to give you a better idea of what things are going to look like for you revenue-wise once you purchase. Number 4 is the client concentration. This is really important. I've been in property management a long time, and I have seen out there many times of like, I want to score the really big clients, manage for a builder or manage 100 doors. And that's fine. I had those type of clients. I worked in a market where I managed for quite a few home builders and they were great clients. But if one left, that was a huge hit to my bottom line and my overall revenue. If I had 2 leave, I may have had to lay off a staff member because it would have been a huge hit. Those are things that you want to look at. While they may be good revenue, if one of them leaves, that's a big deal. That will make a difference in what you should be offering to purchase that company for. And then team structure. So again, we've talked about the owner and like what the owner does, but who is actually running things? Are things truly documented? And when I say documented, I mean legitimately documented. I used myself as an example. When I first opened my company, I had things half-assed documented, like a lot of us do, right? Half of it was in my head, half was in some Google Docs. I used the Asana at the time. Things were kind of like all over. I knew what was going on. But as I started to grow, even before I bought a company, I realized quickly, like, yeah, I don't really have them documented. So I did start using a process system. I used Monday.com. We documented everything. We took every single process and built it into a system. If I hired a new team member, they could sit down between the PMS system and Monday system and do their job. So that made a huge difference. That's what I mean by documented. not just like the rando stuff everywhere. And that's, again, okay. Like if they don't have everything documented, that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it will make a big difference for you and your team if you're stimulating those things. You also have to look at the team members. So if you are keeping team members as part of the purchase, are they going to fit into your culture? If you run 100% paperless and you're buying 100% paper office, and the property manager there has been there for like 15 years and they know everything inside and out, but they have never had to log into a Monday.com system or a tenant turner or whatever, that's going to be a really big shift for them. It doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means that you have to really look at your time frame of expectations. So not only am I buying 300 doors, but I'm also looking at all this training and I have to bring this person in and fit them into my culture. And then lastly, can they operate without the owner? Again, it just really depends. None of these are really deal breakers. It's just a matter of, is it a deal breaker for you personally and your particular goals and your outcome? So last one, then the contract lock-in. What's locked in? Like what can walk away? This could be a few different of the contracts. One, the lease agreement you want to take a look at. What does the lease agreement really say? Is it compliant with your landlord-tenant laws? How different is it than your lease? Are you going to be able to manage for a year having multiple leases? Same thing with property management agreement. Do they have a cancellation fee? Can they cancel? What does that look like? And then keeping in mind your team and their threshold for what they're able to do. Can your team manage 2 or 4 different contracts for an entire 12 months? That's what it realistically could potentially look like. And then the final contract for purchase, you want to make sure that everything that should be in there is in there and that you really are using a good attorney, or you've also been working with like a coach with myself since the very beginning so that you can be educated to ensure that you really have everything dialed in and so that you're not doing a purchase like the first time and then learning things months later and losing money and sleep and time. We have reviewed quite a bit on the 90-day plan. We talked about conversation, due diligence, the contract, and closing. Now that you've seen the roadmap, know what to evaluate, and understand the mindset shift from operator to acquirer, here's my question to you. Do you want to build your acquisition strategy with me in person? I have a very cool event I'm super excited about. I am doing a live 1-day in-person event in Las Vegas. As of now, I only have 6 spots left. It is limited to a very small group. It is going to be a very intimate affair. And I'm like I said, I'm so excited. I love doing my online things and I work with everybody online all the time, but I cannot wait to get into a room with like-minded individuals who walk in with maybe the operator mindset, transform themselves, and then walk out as an acquirer. And it's going to be great. So it's from 10 to 5 in Las Vegas at the Suncoast Hotel and Casino. Imagine walking into a hotel suite. All you need to do is show up. I will have everything for you. I'm going to have a nice notebook for you that you get to take home with everything we've hit on here today. It's going to be a super deep dive into how to go further. You're going to get examples of everything you need to become an acquirer in your market. You really don't have to bring anything. You're going to have snacks, beverages, lunch will be served in the room. And then we all get to go to dinner together at 6:00 that night. And we can chat further, bounce ideas off each other, and grow a new network together. So I would love to see you in Las Vegas. I would love to be able to work with you in person and dive deeper into everything. The investment is $24.97, and all of my bootcamp attendees also get a bonus when you purchase today and save your spot. You'll get to do a 30-minute bonus call with me ahead of time before we go to Vegas so that we can deep dive into your specific plans and where you are in your journey, and then talk a little bit about your market in that room with all the snacks and beverages. We're ready to go. I would love to see you there. I've had some questions. I've had this out here for a couple of weeks. And I know I've had a few people kind of pop up questions. So I just thought I'd go through them first. Is like, I'm not ready yet. And I get that. I used to be in that operator mindset. In fact, I never even thought of myself as a business buyer, but it was so cool to finally jump into that arena and be like, oh, yeah, I'm badass. I just bought a business and I added to mine all this additional revenue and create new jobs throughout the world and through my area. I think anybody can do it and be ready. It's just a matter of wanting to transform your mindset. As far as the investment goes, 24.97. I do like to remind everyone as far as the acquisition, the ROI on it. Even if you acquired 100 door and let's say it had 150K revenue, that would pay itself back like 15 times. That is where you just have to look at the cheat code for your time, whether you keep running after 2 to 3, 5 doors at a time, or if you're running after bigger acquisitions, then there you go. Like you've cheat coded your time and bought time back for yourself. It's one day and it's Vegas, which is super cool. If you're there for PM systems, then you just have to stay one more night. If you haven't signed up for PM systems, that's okay. Just fly in the morning. We don't start till 10 a.m. So you could get off a flight, maybe have a beverage and show up. I'll take care of you the rest of the day. You can either go home that night or stay in Vegas for the weekend. Invite your significant other. What if I can't find a deal? This one I've talked a lot about with different people. What I'm going to be teaching you is like deep diving into all of it, thinking like an acquirer, learning how to evaluate the different opportunities, and then how to structure the deals. A whole day is going to give us a lot more time to work on that. Once you start believing that you're an acquirer of businesses, the deals will start appearing. It kind of goes back to that mindset. So I don't have capital for a deal. This is where we're definitely going to be deep diving into during Vegas. I'm going to be using my personal acquisition as a case study. When I bought mine, I did not have any money. I was still a single mom, had a challenging divorce, and had to rebuild my life. I put a very small amount of cash down and did seller financing. It worked for me. And it was exactly what the seller wanted. He didn't want a bunch of cash up front. And it worked for me because I didn't have a lot of cash up front. And that was that. So we're going to talk about seller financing. We're going to talk about SBA loans and different places you can go to talk about them. The biggest thing is you don't have to have a ton of money in the bank. The coolest thing about buying a property management company is that you are buying income. You are making money right away. You have revenue. As long as you've done your due diligence and structured it correctly, it's a win-win for everybody. I would love to see you in Vegas. I have QR codes on everything. You can scan them. There will be a link included in the replay. If you have questions, pop them in. Stacey asked, how does the reason for selling tailor your conversation and or your desire to buy? For me, it really tailored how I was looking at long-term. We'll go more into this in person in Vegas as well. When I was having conversations with the reason to sell, if you are selling for a specific reason, like let's say you just want out and you're tired, I know you're probably not going to stick around for much of a transfer. I'm then structuring what it's going to look like for me workload wise in the future. Let's see here. Amy loved my ring concept, my wedding. Yes, that was new. I'm glad you all like that analogy. Ty, what should we budget for closing costs, the cost of legal, accounting, insurance, etc.? That is a very good question. Of course, that is going to be dependent on your market and kind of what your people charge. I would say, Ty, if it was me, I would start calling around just to get an idea of what those costs would be so I can start factoring them in. When I said that I had not a lot of money to buy, I didn't have thousands in the bank necessarily. However, there are costs up front. Just like if you're buying a home, you're going to have to pay an inspector and stuff. So you do want to factor that in. But I would call around to your local people and start building those relationships as well and kind of see what they would charge. Okay, so I can learn from others' mistake. What do most owners screw up when they try to buy? I would say not enough due diligence. And again, we're going to go deeper into that in Las Vegas in person, but the due diligence piece definitely is the biggest piece. And a lot of it, it's because people just don't know what to look for or what to ask. So those are some of the things I'm going to be going deeper into. That's a really good question. What if I feel like I'm not well versed in the acquisitions or the terminology concepts? Back in the day before I bought my business, I had no idea. I didn't even know what EBITDA was. So that's okay. We all have to start from somewhere. That's part of why I'm doing an in person event to break down and go deeper into what the terminology means. Like when I say M&A, a lot of people are like, what is that? Mergers and acquisitions. So, yes, we'll go through a lot of the terminology and make it so that you're feeling more like an expert and transforming yourself into an acquirer. Amelia, I'm interested in exploring my options, but I don't have a target company nailed down. Is it still useful for me? Yes, I would say yes, it's definitely still useful to come to Vegas for sure. That kind of goes back with Ty's question. This will be a really good opportunity to start pre-thinking like, okay, these are the different steps that you're going to need to take. This is what you need to do. Well, I again would be happy to answer any more questions. These were really good questions. I really want to thank everybody for attending today. There will be a replay in your email so you can go back through and listen and take notes. If you're able to make it to Vegas, I would love to see you in person. It is so much fun to work with people in person. It is not a day of me standing in front of a group of people and lecturing. This is very much hands on, collaborative, like in the trenches type working on things and working on your own personal development and transformation, which is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm happy to stick around and answer any additional questions for anybody. Again, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day on Friday in December. I hope everyone has an awesome weekend and hopefully some fun plans resting up before the big holidays. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Stacey, Amy, Brittany, and everybody. Hopefully, I will see you all again soon. Have a great weekend. Thanks so much.